into it, and a lot of people in this room were part of that movement.
So, I mean, I think the conversation is great. It's really important. It's very hard to move any agenda forward without conversation. I think one of the things that we try to think about a lot is, okay, so what next? Like, it's really great to be trending, but at the end of the day, trending is, and I know that's a word people use, but it really is, like, it's great that there's an article about the 5 feminist things that Jennifer Lawrence said, or that someone shares a video about some dumb thing some male VC partner said on stage at Disrupt again. I think the question is, what happens after that? So unless at our companies, whether it's a VC firm or a large tech company, both women and men are talking about young women in the workplace in a different way, so that other young members of their companies get the right messages, you don't start to see a ground up change. And I think that's kind of where we now need to be leading the conversation.
No, definitely. And then, you know, when it came to starting your careers in tech, whether it was a little bit more a later decision after law and management consulting, or whether it was kind of your first job when you were looking, what was enticing about the tech industry to make that move or make that decision, and what was surprising to you when you were there?
So prior to coming to Plum Alley, I was working for a nonprofit that really addressed youth inequalities as it pertained to race and gender in upstate New York. And I remember getting really fascinated by thinking about how you could address issues like inequality in a way that was way more head-on than dealing with kind of the repercussions after the fact. And I actually was thinking about going to law school and was planning on taking that route. And I was so enticed by the fact that tech offered, you know, if you found a solution, if you could find a way to actually influence these issues, you could just change it. You could just create it. You didn't have to, you know, wait to deal with all the systemic issues after the fact. And I think that that's something that's really unique about tech, and it's really enticing. And you know, if you have a solution, you can build it. And it's in many ways the only industry where that type of, you know, ability exists.
Yeah, and I think in many ways, like technology itself, the platform, right? It's colorblind, it's gender blind. It really is. There's so much innovation happening, and there really is an opportunity for anyone to participate. I've been in tech for a long time. I remember when I first joined AOL, I was the only professional woman in my department. Everyone else was an assistant, and then, yeah, it's crazy. And then over time, the women in the group built up, and there's a more diverse group, and then I went to JumpCap, and I was probably the most senior woman in the company, but then not on the leadership team. So, which had its own challenges. But one of the reasons, like, why we founded Women in Wireless was to start creating a platform for women in at least the wireless industry, where we could really promote and develop more female leaders in the industry. We literally started as a handful of women. We would meet up at conferences and just get drinks because we all knew each other. There was maybe like a few dozen of us. And then over time, it became a bigger and bigger organization. And I think the beauty of technology is that it lets you foster these kinds of platforms and easily build these kinds of communities.
So perhaps somewhat embarrassingly, my foray into tech had nothing to do with being a woman, although that is where I've ended up, built by girls. I'm just obsessed with new things, as I think most of the people in this room are. I'm just fascinated by the way technology can change our lives, and that's what we spend time investing in. I'm like an obsessive consumer. Like anything you put in front of me, I will buy it if it's pretty and it works well. And you know, we think about what are the things that make our lives simpler, better, or even more delightful. And it's remarkable to see. We've probably seen 800 companies since we launched. So to anyone who tells you there aren't any female founders out there, as the people in this room knows, that's rubbish. But it's a remarkable thing to come to work every day and see new things. So that's why I'm in tech.
Yeah, no, that's great. And in terms of, you know, I know you were saying that what brought you there was the I guess fascination with what's new. And then when you were there, I guess when you first got to AOL, did you feel different? Like when you were looking around in your peer group, or when you were thinking about this was your dream because that's what you love, but didn't necessarily mean that you loved it because it was a particular opportunity for a woman, or it was kind of more an after effect of thinking about how can we do more for women?
Well, I kind of feel like there are two questions. So, what was it really new, and then how did women play into that? I think my perspective is from stodgy kind of professional services, right? So, being a lawyer is pretty black and white. Being a management consultant is like vaguely more creative, if you can call Excel spreadsheets more creative. But I think what was really interesting was even coming into a company like AOL that is kind of a big tech company. They've obviously been around for a while. That the pace of a technology company is completely different. And it was remarkable to see how quickly decisions get made, and not always the right decision, but how quickly the organization can pivot around that. But from a female perspective, what was interesting was seeing the opportunities. So when you are able to work at a consumer-facing company, you see the way in which the female consumer drives, 85% of purchasing decisions, is the majority user on nearly every single big consumer internet platform except for Reddit, and they can have it. But you see these market forces at play, right? And that's why we launched the fund, because we believe that if the woman is the end consumer to most of these things, then she should really be the one we're investing in, and that's where the greater opportunity is.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think kind of to move forward to what you were saying about after the conversation. What happens. And I would love to kind of hear about your respective organizations and what you guys are doing to really address this head on, whether it's Women in Wireless, whether it's Plum Alley, whether it's BBG, kind of the different programs, the different results that you've seen, the learnings that you guys have had.
I mean, I can speak from Women in Wireless, we look at Women in Wireless as really being a platform. So our mission is to promote and develop female leaders in mobile and digital media. And for us, the way that we're doing that is we're creating a platform where women can network, but also develop whatever skills they really need to develop to take with them into their professional career. So if you're someone who's aspiring to speak more at conferences, maybe your company doesn't allow you to speak on their behalf, but you can speak on behalf of Women in Wireless and talk about diversity-related issues. Or if you want to manage people, you can manage a committee or take a leadership role and really build that experience. So we look at it, the organization has a very clear mission. We definitely stand for more women leaders in wireless, but we also want to be a platform that women leaders can use to develop whatever is the gap that's keeping them from getting to the next level.
So at Plum Alley, the idea behind the investments platform was really, as you mentioned, women are trending, and the abysmal rate at which women get funding in comparison to their male counterparts is, those statistics are absolutely everywhere. And, I think that there is a lot of great effort around how do we go about changing the mindsets or the protocols that already exist in these large companies that are led by white men and get them to care about women and minorities. And that work that's happening over there is important and it's great, but what we're really trying to do at Plum Alley is try to harness capital that's not being used right now, that's kind of sitting idly on the sideline. And we know that there's, I think, 11 trillion globally assets owned and controlled by women that is just not being utilized. And women historically think about making money and helping others kind of as siloed. And when you think about women supporting other women, it's always a lot of times via philanthropy, and the idea that you can support women and also make money, I feel like we still need to have those two come together. So that's really what we're trying to do. So we've grown the space of investors, of women that have capital, that want to make money for the sake of that as well, but they also, are interested in supporting other women. And so, that's kind of the premise behind our platform, and we're trying to attack it, kind of find the people that care and use that and utilize that, rather than try to change the mindsets of people that just don't care, because it's going to be a longer path.
So we obviously invest in companies with at least one female founder, so it might seem pretty straightforward, but the way we really think about it from a broader perspective is, as you said, this is not a philanthropic endeavor, right? So sometimes we meet people and they're like, oh, you invest in women, that's so great. Okay. But the whole point is, if we can create a strong returning fund, that's the work we need to do, right? Like, we need to show that women are a great investment, and they are, and 500 Startups knows it, and the first round work that just came out, I think the assessment of 10 years of their portfolio founders, women-founded companies, 63%, better returns or ROI. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. So I think that's one piece of it. And as we grow, we'll spend a bit more time on the ecosystem. So how do we, if we can identify the problems that women have in getting in front of other VCs that don't have female partners, if we can help, one of the things we say is we will make as many introductions for you as possible, even if we don't invest in you. Like, consider us in your corner. So then on the other side, we're working a lot with young women in technology, and that's what #BuiltByGirls is. So as an example, last year we brought on 4 17-year-old girls from Girls Who Code to sit with us at the fund for the summer. And they went through a 360-degree learning program taught by some of the best founders and VCs in New York City to learn everything from what is product development, what is branding, what's a business model, what's a term sheet. I think everyone in this room probably would love to do this course too. I would have when I was 17. But really to understand, like, it's great to tell girls to get into tech, but then what? And so we had them sit in on all our pitch meetings every week, and then at the end of every week, they had to present back to us based on what they'd learned on whether we should or should not invest in the companies. And fun fact, of the 15 companies they saw, 2 of the ones they chose as the top 2 were companies that we ended up investing in. So, and then we held a competition where they had to fund other girls. So I think as well, it's up to us to think about how can we, in addition to the great work Black Girls Code and Girls Who Code and all these programs are doing, what can we do on the VC side to get young women into VC?
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful point. We've kind of spoken about it during the day as well, just being able to have someone who can relate on the other side of the table. So when you're a founder, founding and increasing that number is one thing, but also increasing people on the other side that can, understand a lot better the perspective that is being brought on. And in general, I guess, you were saying the differences of the silo of the kind of the philanthropy part and women who want to make money has kind of been separate, and the same goes, I guess, with kind of the learning by doing, which I think you're really promoting through your programs. What have been some of the biggest challenges, not only internally but or externally maybe, in getting that movement really to kind of go on its own?
Well, so Plum Alley Investments just closed our first investment in a really phenomenal company that was led by a woman who sold companies for millions of dollars before she had already Microsoft Ventures arm invested in. This was, no investment is a sure thing, but this was pretty damn close. And we had all these women, 20 that were ready to sign up, and still at the last minute, everyone ended up investing, and this is something we see a lot of times with the entrepreneurs that we work with, that they needed that a little bit more support right before they wrote the check. And they wanted to do it, and they were right there, but they just needed, we actually had the members call each other and be like, hey, you can do this, I'm doing this, let's do it. And just creating that community it's hard. It's a challenge that I don't want to say it doesn't exist when it comes to men investing, but it's definitely something that I see dealing with women investors and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think for us, obviously that's our mandate, right? So there are less challenges at AOL, that's what our money's there for. I think where we see the challenges are still at the A and the B round. So, there have been a few articles that have come out recently, and you look at the number of female founders who are raising A's and B's versus male founders, and the numbers are still pretty small. So the question for us is, how can we help the A and B and C firms of the world on both the East Coast and the West Coast, at least here in America. How do we help them think differently about female-led companies? And so that goes to the introduction, and it goes to relationship building earlier, I think, so that seed funds are helping female founders get to the next round.
If you guys were to think of some tangible goals for our audience and just for organizations, for VCs, for anyone really to set for themselves when it came to diversity in women, what would some of those goals be? Like all of the things that you're working on right now, in the big picture, what are you trying to kind of see, I guess?
I mean, I would love to see organizations see whether they're looking for investments or whether they're looking to hire, making sure that they get a diverse pool of candidates. Like, you don't want to fit the quota to the results, but you want to make sure you're seeing a lot of things. I was talking to an investor on the phone yesterday, and he does a lot of mobile investing. He said, one of my goals for this year is to invest in more women. I'm like, oh, that's so great. And then just earlier in the conversation, I talked about 2 different companies that had female founders. He's like, no, I'm not interested in that. Like, it's great to have goals, but it's also like, what are you doing? If you're not meeting with them, if you're not making sure that your pool of candidates is diverse, you're not going to pick those companies. So I think just getting that as an objective would be really a big changer.
I think my overarching point on that would be that if you have a company, you should make the demographic of that company reflect the demographic of the world. So guess what? It's half women, half men. That's what you should have in your company. And I think that, more tangibly, when I think about what you can do, I think about recently like Mark Benioff, who's CEO of Salesforce, doing a company-wide 17,000 employee kind of system to make sure that every man and woman in the same position, no matter the office, is getting paid the same amount. And dedicating a team within his company to make sure that's happening. Which, when something's growing very quickly, and a woman comes in and they ask what salary she wants, and she pitches a number and they say that's fine, and she finds out a year later that the 5 guys in her department were making 10K more. Making sure that you're putting processes in place that right from the get-go make men and women equal, and obviously across races as well.
So I just got back from the biggest feminist bubble there is. I was at the Makers Conference in LA, and everyone was at Gloria Steinem and Black Girls Code, and it was amazing. And there's a lot of talk about quotas, right? And I think all of that's really important. And in many countries, Joanna Bash presented some great statistics on the work they've done in Sweden and Finland, and how that's been really helpful with the setting of goals. But I think on a day-to-day perspective, what we try to think about is what can you do individually? And I really think everyone has to, and I'm pretty sure everyone in this room does it, at least in their heads, but how can you step up and challenge people when they're exhibiting sameness of thought and pattern recognition? Because I think the reality is we all indulge in pattern recognition, and so even beyond men versus women, but just being diverse in general, this conversation is really about diversity in thought. And so I think taking it upon yourself to challenge the people in your team, your seniors, and lead by example by showing the ability to think differently. And so Susan and I do that at BBG Ventures as well, which is to say, we haven't really done a great job if all the founders in our portfolio look and talk exactly like us. Right, like even that is not a great diverse portfolio, and so it's important to find founders or VCs that can change your perception, and that's the same with every single team, because you'll be a stronger team.
And that actually segues quite perfectly into the next question of, when it comes to advice that you have on an individual basis, what does that look like? And potentially it's just kind of challenging yourself, or what would you say is advice that you can give to the audience on how they can be more aware or conscious of how they can act upon.
So I think part of being aware and conscious. Oh, you can hear me. Okay, thanks. Part of being more aware and more conscious is just like seeing who you have in the room and seeing who you're engaging with and who's part of the community, and just making sure that that's a diverse body. But one of the things I always I just want to touch on, there's different kinds of leadership in the space. There are people who are, Gloria Steinem is a great example, who are just the champions and they're going to fight every injustice and be very vocal. And no movement, diversity or any movement could exist without those vocal champions of change. There's also people who kind of work inside the community and they build kind of strength inside the community that lets people kind of fill in the gaps so that they can be competitive and win in the broader playing field, so to say. And I think whether you're the change agent that's kind of screaming and pointing out every injustice, or whether you're working inside your community and really making sure that the members of your community are strong and really strong players in the broader community, like you're contributing. And I think everyone here is contributing in some way, either side, and it's awesome to see that.
So I would say go to, I think it's managing.fb.com or managingbias.fb.com. Facebook just released online their Managing for Unconscious Bias training, and I think just there is all sorts of bias that you don't recognize, whoever you are, and whether that's about the working mother or a woman being pregnant. I think that is a really great tangible thing that you can go and do, and even if you just read it through once, you would probably pick up on something that you thought, maybe I did have that thought last time and it didn't really cross my mind, and now I'll really think about that a second time.
Great. I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to some questions, and then we'll end the same way with the same question that we've been asking all of our